Hello, everybody. Welcome to yet another edition of the Middle Georgia Spotlight. I'm your host, Jack Ellis. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Caduceus Medicine, J. Franklin Automotive, and, of course, the people here at WMUB, Channel 38 at Mercer University. Joining us in the Spotlight this week is Simonia Blassingame, who is the president and CEO of the Forsythia Festival and Forsyth, which is part of the Monroe Forsyth big signature event, but she'll tell us all about that. Welcome to our program.
Thank you so much for having me and inviting me. I appreciate it.
Well, you know, a lot of people probably ask, what is a Forsythia? What is the Forsythia Festival? First of all, what is a Forsythia?
Forsythia is a plant. It's grown in the southeastern U.S. and it grows in Monroe County. So when the organizers who originally put this program together wanted to come up with a name, they chose the Forsythia plant.
Now, you're the president and CEO
of the Forsyth Monroe County Chamber of Commerce.
Yes. And this is an event that's sponsored yearly under the auspices of the Chamber of Commerce.
That is correct, exactly.
Now, I understand you've been in your position
about 60 days.
About 60 days now.
60 days. And
you are, what I did my research, you're a retired Navy captain.
I am.
And which is quite an accomplishment in and of itself for
Thank
those
you.
of us who, if you haven't been in the military, you hear about a colonel who's full colonel. A captain in the Navy is the same as a full colonel, which
That's
is an 06.
Yes.
So tell me, we're going to talk a little bit more about the festival, but how difficult was it? How, maybe not difficult is the right word, but how challenging, challenging, difficult, the same thing, isn't it? Different has it been transferred from the military, higher ranking officer, to the top of a civilian organization, the Chamber of Commerce?
Well, I would say it's different, not necessarily difficult. So the challenge is that I obviously, as you mentioned, because I had 25 years in the military, I did not come from the chamber or economic development world. And so there's obviously terminology and processes that are in place in my new position that I am unfamiliar with from military. But there are things that are very similar. So they hired me for leadership. So that is something that I did for 25 years, and that background transfers. I worked as a public servant doing money, financial management matters for the government. And so managing funds and finances for a nonprofit organization, again, it's the codes we use may be different, but the principles behind it are the same. Sort of treat it as though it were your own and be a good steward. And so those things do translate over to what I'm doing now in my new position.
Yeah. But now this is a one-time event. It happens every year.
It happens every year, the second.
In March.
In March.
And the dates are what?
It's always usually the second weekend into the March. We have a kickoff event, and then folks can look for us to do this festival the same time every year.
And this one is the dates for this festival?
It's going to be the 14th and 15th. We've had events that started even February 29th. We have a concert that's coming up this week. We have the Duke Chorale who's coming in to participate. So folks that are interested in the full calendar of events can go to the ForsythiaFestival.com website to get more information. But our signature two events are the arts and crafts events that are going to be on Saturday and Sunday. And so that's when we invite vendors to come in, both food vendors and then arts and craft vendors to come in and share their wares with the community. A lot of our vendors come to Forsythia every year and mark it as sort of the kickoff to their spring festival season in the Southeast.
Now, you mentioned festival, a concert. Of course, a lot of people gather in concerts, and I'm hearing with this coronavirus thing that people are telling people to what precautionary measures are you all taking, or are you concerned about this with the large crowds that will be?
So let's talk first about the festival itself. It's an open air festival, so it's outside, and we don't have anything in contained spaces. So what we have done in terms of watching the news, just like every other citizen and talking with officials, is increased our hand washing and sanitation stations throughout the footprint of the festival so that folks can feel reasonably comfortable that if they want hand sanitizer or to wash their hands, which is the recommendation to keep the transmission down, they'll be able to do that at our festival. The indoor concerts you mentioned at the Fine Arts Center is in an enclosed space, and so what I would, as the non-public health official or a person who is not a medical doctor, I would encourage folks to follow the precautions that are put out by the public health community that say if you're elderly or you're concerned because you have a compromised immune system that perhaps you should not attend closed events. And so we would certainly abide by that. If it were me and I were elderly and I had a compromised immune system, then perhaps I would forgo the festival, as an example.
Yeah. Well, now people come from all around this festival, I understand, not just a little people who come from Atlanta and throughout. How many people do you normally, I noticed your first one, but based on historical data, but how many people participate in this?
Normally throughout our festival, we do anticipate about 25,000 visitors, local and surrounding areas to come to our festival, yes.
Well, we are on the heels of Black History Month, and we're in the middle of Women's History Month. So you get a twofer. You are obviously the first African American to hold this position, if I'm not mistaken.
I would believe that you're correct. I'll be honest, I have not asked.
Well, I haven't heard of one.
And they've not advertised, but...
Yeah. Do you know of any other African American?
I do
not. So we're going to say that you're the first one to hold this position.
Okay.
And I'm sure you're the first former Navy captain to hold this position. And you're not the first woman.
No.
But you're the first African American woman. If you're the first African American, obviously you would be the first African American woman. So that's quite an accomplishment in and of itself, to be a woman in such high position and to be the first African American woman in that position. So tell us a little bit about this festival. And when I say your color is yellow because the flower is yellow.
Okay.
And what do you all, obviously this is the one time it happened once a year, but the Chamber of Commerce is year round. Is this a way to promote goodwill for the community, or just something for the community as well as promote the community for future investors and so forth?
It is probably a combination of both. So as the Chamber of Commerce, we seek to involve and advocate for the members of the Chamber, but we also want to encourage visiting community to our city. We want folks to know what a treasure we have in Forsythia and Monroe County, and the only way to really do that is by opening your doors and letting folks come in and sort of see us. And so we do spend part of our mission, if you will, would include a component of tourism, which is why we host this event, while we still maintain hosting as opposed to another organization. It does fit with the Chamber mission.
Now, what's the largest employer in Monroe County? Would it be the government, the state? I know they have big offices.
Well, like you start talking about the Board of Education, if you think about the teachers and that large footprint in Monroe County, that is a great question, and it's not. It escapes me because I actually looked this information up this week to sort of understand more about our tax registry base, where our support comes from. You're right, the school system is certainly one of our larger employers. After the school system.
What about the Commission of Prisons is there?
Yes,
right?
That's exactly who it was.
Yeah.
I did a tour with Leadership Monroe to the Department of Corrections, and so they have Dipstick that is there, which is their training facility, but we also have two Department of Corrections facility there as well.
Which is the old Tiff College.
Which is where Dipstick is located, correct.
They're located there. Now, we have heard in Macon and Bibb County, the focus has been on warehousing and distribution because of our relationship to Atlanta, our proximity to Atlanta and I-75. Well, you are closer to Atlanta and probably closer to I-75 because we're 475 going. What is your primary, when you look at industries that you are pursuing?
So that's also a really good question. It's probably more in the lane of what our development authority is doing. Okay. Now, from a chamber perspective, we partner and collaborate with the development authority in terms of
retention. Your job is retention.
Retention of business and encouraging new businesses and industries that come to the area to join and become a member of the chamber. But the actual acquisition of business and industry belongs to the development authority. But we partner with them. We have a meeting, if you will, with the city, the county, the development authority, the local hospital, the Board of Education, where we actually do meet and talk strategy about where do we want to be as a community 10, 20 years from now and what that would look like. And one of the upcoming topics for us is, do we want to target specific industries? And if yes, what would that be?
Well, let's make it clear that you didn't just show up in Mills, Georgia. You were born and raised in Mills, Georgia. But now you reside in Forsyth. But you were born in Macon.
I was born in Macon. I was raised in Jones County Public High School is where I graduated from. So
went to Spelman?
Went to Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. So I'm very familiar with Middle Georgia. You would say I left Middle Georgia when I went off to college, spent my military career, and of course what they say is no place like home, and so I found myself back. One of the reasons I chose Monroe County was because of its proximity to the Atlanta airport. So the things you mentioned about why businesses would consider Monroe County are the same reasons why a person would choose to live there, and so that was one of the deciding factors for me.
How did you become an officer? You got ROTC, a direct commission, you went to Reserve Officers Training?
I did 2 years of ROTC at the Morehouse Navy ROTC unit in Atlanta.
And got your commission?
And received the commission and then...
And went from there. Well, let's get back to, we wanted to know that about, I want to know who the president and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce is. So now I know a little bit more than I knew before. But this festival, do you charge any events that you have to pay? Like you said, the concert.
The concert.
Is that a ticketed event?
That is the concert will be with David Phelps, and yes, that is a ticketed event. You would go to ForsythiaFestival.com for tickets, but the open air festival Saturday and Sunday is free and open to the public. We had a party, if you will, a celebration last weekend, which was a paid event. So there are a mixture of paid and free events in our repertoire for our 3 weeks of celebration, I would say.
So to use a Navy term, you've been on board how long?
I've been on board about 60 days.
60?
2 months.
60 days. So now you have this big festival that you're coordinating and executing in 60 days. So I guess it's a great learning curve.
It is a great learning curve. I will say for me personally, just like in the military, you can do nothing by yourself. And so I happen to have 2 great staffers that work with me full-time at the Chamber, one of which we're all relatively new. Ms. Carrie Burkendale joined the team right after the festival of last year, so she's done an amazing job of ramping up, getting us ready for this year's festival. And we hired a new office manager in Rebecca Smart, who's very organized and excited, but she would often attend Chamber events just as a regular citizen, things like our annual meeting, which are open to the public and that sort of thing. So what I have is 2 folks who are really supportive of Chamber events and functions, working alongside with me. So I anticipate we're going to have a fantastic weekend.
Well, great. So the time of the festival is Friday?
Saturday.
With the dates again?
The 14th and 15th.
14th to 15th from 8 a.m. to all day?
That would be a little long. Oh. So on Saturday, we will open our doors at 10 and close at 6 p.m. On Sunday, we open up again at 11 with our vendors and close down at 5. So 10 to 6 on Saturday, 11 to 5 on Sunday.
Well, great. I'm sure everyone is welcome to come to
Everybody is welcome to come to Forsyth.
In the Forsythia
We would love to have you.
Festival. Well, thank you very much for joining us and sharing with the vast audience here on the Middle Georgia Spotlight. And we hope that we wish you well, number one, in your new position, much success, and much success with the festival.
Thank you so much.
Well, we thank you all. I want you to hold tight because we're going to come back and we're going to talk to a man that knows a lot about Forsyth, and we're going to talk about some history, especially black history in Forsyth. We're going to have Dr. Duval with us. But we've been talking to Miss Simonia Blassingame, who is the president and CEO of the Forsyth Monroe Chamber of Commerce. Be right back. Welcome back to the Middle Georgia Spotlight. Joining us now is Dr. Thomas Duval. Dr. Thomas Duval is a retired dentist. He was not only was a retired dentist, but he's a retired public health dental director and the first African American to hold that position for the state of Georgia. And he's a historian. I guess you would say an amateur historian, but once you have as much research as he's done, he's a professional historian. I'd like to welcome you to our program.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
I tell folks I'm just interested in my piece of red clay dirt. That's what I've been doing in my retirement.
Well, that's what Georgia is. We got a lot of red clay here. The first part of the program had a young lady, speaking of history, you're a history buff, had a young lady who happens to be the first African American to to be the CEO, president and CEO of the Monroe Forsyth County Chamber of Commerce. And you have you know about the history of Monroe County, the Hubbards, and so forth. Tell us a little bit about the Hubbards and how that became part of Fort Valley State you were sharing with me.
Yes, through Mr. Gant and Miss Rosemary Walker up in Forsyth, I gleaned a lot of good information. Professor William Marita Hubbard basically ran the Forsyth Industrial Normal School up there. And
that was a school for colored children?
Yeah, this is, I should say, the Forsyth Industrial Colored Normal School, as we were called back in the day. And it was an interesting thing. His story is really inspiring. He was actually a photographer, and basically he was given the site for his photography room at a school, and he said, well, I'll teach if I can do my photography. And from that, he branched on out and actually started the school up there. And the interesting thing is that school is really the precursor to Fort Valley State College, as we used to know it. And his brother was the Hubbard Funeral Home here in Macon, Georgia. And, of course, that was located on Cotton Avenue. And the Hutchins family and the Hubbards were in business together at one time. It's just interesting to me how all of these things kind of integrate. And you start in one part of the state, and then you begin to realize that we're all interconnected. And it gets back to that old thing where it says, we're all just cousins,
yeah.
You know?
Well, speaking of us all being cousins, some of the cousins didn't get their fair share, if you will, when this country was being developed, when Georgia was when cotton was made king, and African Americans were working for free. What's your position? Reparations has been, now we know the accomplishments that African Americans have made since slavery and so forth, but we cannot forget the fact that they were enslaved, that we were enslaved for 400 years. What's your position on reparation that so many people are talking about? The Congressional Black Caucus just passed a resolution. Every member signed, said, yes, we need to establish a commission to study it. Where do you come down on it as a historian?
Well, I would agree we need a commission to study it, but I think from my public health training, basically I think we kind of need to go upstream to see basically what we lost. And in my mind, one of the major things we lost was opportunity. And the worst thing that I think we lost was our history and culture. Because a group of people, for the most part, are trained to deny and denigrate their history and culture, then you can control them, okay? And so what we need to do is to teach our children our great history and culture, and especially our local history and culture, because it connects to them. Because what we really want to do to fix the problems that we have today is to motivate them to want to learn. And the way you do that is you teach them, these African American so-called at-risk kids, that they have an African American ancestral obligation to learn based upon the trials and tribulations that their ancestors went through. So when you talk about reparations, in my mind, I'm interested in things where we can wrap this rich history and culture around education, and specifically wrap it around milestone prep. So not only are we building self-esteem, telling these kids who they are, but we're also giving them the skill sets that they will need to pass their standardized tests, because every state has a state proficiency exam. So wrap this great history and culture around these state proficiency exams, and then I think we have a strategy for success. You see, before I worked in public health, I worked in the prison system. And I was there about 15 years, and I jokingly said when I got out or when I left, I kept saying, what's really wrong with these guys? And I came to the conclusion they don't know who they are. They think they are that gang sign, but because that's their total identity. So if we're going to talk about reparations, I'm interested in using any funding, grants, or whatever we can get to go back and really give these kids their foundational information about their history and culture and where they came from, and build up that self-esteem and get rid of this so-called self-hate.
How important is it, Doctor, that, yes, it's important for the young African American to know who he or she is and the trials and tribulations, but how important it is for the population at large to know this history as well?
It's important for everybody to know it, because African American history or black history is nothing but the left out part of American history. And if you're going to have history taught, you need the complete story. So you and I, we've had just a little minor disagreement about the Confederate statues.
Yes.
I, for example, say, no, don't tear them down, but let's put some bust of these local iconic figures on those grounds. I have no problem with the statue staying there if you got Lucy Craft Laney, William Saunders Scarborough, Ellen and William Craft bust on those grounds. That's the rest of the story. When you have it the way it is today, you don't have a complete story.
Yeah.
And our kids need to know the rest of the story. I mean, all the kids need to know the rest of the story.
Now, in Athens right now, around the University of Georgia, there's an African-American community, and they have linked their parentage, their foreparents, to that area and helped them build the University of Georgia. So they have petitioned the University of Georgia that if they can identify their lineage, their ancestors tied back to that the University of Georgia should be giving them scholarships, that they should get, if they can get into the university, not, if they qualify to get into the university, that their education should be free because of their foreparents.
Well, I would tend to agree with that. In fact, I think it should be much broader than that. I think there should be an effort for kids to get basically a free or low-income education for all the kids, and especially African-American kids, because of our history and culture. So I would applaud that strategy. The other thing is, I think that if we're going to talk about some kind of reparations, I would love to see reparations in terms of grants be given to HBCUs, because these are supposed to be the bastions of our history and culture. Our HBCUs have, to a great degree, gotten away from even teaching the history of their own institution. But we need to have these programs, these summer programs, that when we get these kids that maybe they don't have the grade point average or the SAT score that they should have at that point. But here's the thing, and this is where we're missing the boat in terms of education strategy. The main thing you want to do is motivate these kids to want to learn. Okay? When you get into our history and culture, you inspire them. You motivate them. You build that self-esteem. You tell them why they should not go to college and waste their time with nonsense, and play and get off into drugs and all kinds of crazy things. You want to touch them here, and when you touch them here, then you can touch them here. That's where we kind of missed the boat. And so any strategy that we can use to build up these HBCUs to do that, and to me, that is the real niche that all of these HBCUs should be shooting for.
Speaking, you mentioned William Saunders Scarborough.
Mm-hmm.
Now, children should know about him. Now, I discovered him later in life. I didn't discover him as a teenager.
So did I.
I discovered him later in life. But here's a man that was born in Macon, Georgia, as a slave. He was 12 years old when slavery ended, so he was old enough to know about that. His father was free, but his mother was a slave. But in those days, you call it your mother. But here's a man that rose, born a slave in Macon, Georgia, and rose to write a Greek classic.
That's
First
right.
and only African American, I understand, to write this.
Right, and became president of
Wilberforce
Wilberforce College.
So you would say that if young black boys and girls knew that, then they would say, there's nothing we can't do.
Right, because here is basically what I'm saying. We got these kids running around here with gang signs and their britches down and all this kind of nonsense. What we really want are these kids running around with T-shirts on that have these local iconic figures and can tell you things about them, because that's their identity. That's who they really are. But we haven't done a good job of teaching them about those kind of characters.
Yeah. So it's our responsibility, the enlightened, if you will, members of the African American community or the community at large, to make sure that this history comes to life. For instance, we are getting ready to celebrate our 200th anniversary, Macon, Bibb County, in about 2 or 3 years. Now, when they did the 100th anniversary, they gave the Negroes in Macon 5 pages out of a 177-page book. We're going to try to make sure that doesn't happen again. But how important is it that we get together and tell this history and document it and put it forth?
I think it is the key strategy to deal with the things that a lot of people don't want to talk about. And those are the academic achievement problem, the problem with bad behavior in the schools, and the black-on-black crime. When you go upstream and you start really figuring out what we need to do, this is what we need to do. Because if we can motivate and inspire, and these kids can develop that moral compass, then we will have that blessed community that we are talking about, and we haven't achieved as yet.
You know, like I said, we need a 30-minute program or more to talk to you, because we want to talk about, and we want to have you back, but our time is, we're up against the clock here. We want to have you talk about after the Civil War in Macon, there were colored troops came here, a regiment. A lot of people are not aware of that.
Right.
That Macon was, when it was occupied, they brought colored regiments here.
That's right.
And how they responded, how the community responded to that, and what was the long-term effect of that, even
That's right.
military and so forth. But I want to thank you so much for sharing with us for this brief time.
Thank you for having me.
But I want to have you back at a time and I want to get the pro and con about reparation. not from my perspective, but someone else. We know where you stand. We want to get someone else and see how we can reach a happy medium to get something done along those lines.
Well, thank you for having me, and I very much appreciate what you're doing in terms of bringing this kind of information to the table and to the community.
Well, thank you very much. We've been talking with Dr. Thomas Duval, who is I wouldn't say amateur history nut. He's a history person, period. And we thank you all for joining us. Watch us on YouTube. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Share us on YouTube. Until next week, I'm your host, Jack Ellis. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.